welcome to another episode of Amanda Homestead. My name is Amanda, and today what we're going to be talking about is something called leaf lard. But there are two different kinds of fat that are rendered down from a pig. One is kind of the back fat, which, as it sounds, is along the back of the animal. And that is good for general cooking. The other kind of fat is called leaf fat, which is actually found kind of on the top of the abdomen and inside the abdomen cavity of the pig, and it kind of surrounds the internal organs. All right, that fat is like super good for rendering down into leaf lard, and leaf lard is like the best thing ever to make pastries. Whether you're going to make a sweet pie pastry, or whether you're going to make something more savory like a chicken pot pie, leaf lard is like the best stuff that you can get. So it's not something that you can get in the grocery store probably, so you're going to likely need a source, ideally a local farmer. That's all right. So let's get started and we'll show you how we do that. Okay, so here is some of our leaf lard here. Okay, and what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to cut it up into small pieces. All right, smaller the pieces the better, because it will render out faster. If you want to kind of put it through like a meat grinder, you want to make sure it's really, really cold. You could do it that way. I'm just going to cut it up small. Okay, so once I have basically cut up enough that I've got a single layer in the bottom of what you want is a really nice heavy cast iron pot to do this, or a Dutch oven. That way it's less likely to kind of scorch on the bottom. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the stove. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let some of this fat start to melt or render out. And then I'm going to kind of stir it to make sure that it's not going to scorch or burn, because we really don't want that, because that's going to give you more of that kind of like porky flavor. And we don't want that, especially for our pastry lard. So once the fat has really begun to melt and you start to get these little bubbles, that's when you can add a little bit more fat, a little bit more of the leaf lard kind of chopped up pieces in kind of one layer at a time. All right, you can do this in a crock pot if you don't have a cast iron pot. The only thing about the crock pot is we are going to try, and we're melting the fat, but we also want to burn off all the water that's in here, and that's what creates what they call a shelf-stable product, so that way it won't go bad. So if you're going to use a crock pot, you need to leave the lid off so that way the water can evaporate, all right? And put that crock pot on low. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of keep adding layer by layer as this starts to kind of melt and render out until I've got all the lard in here that I want to render. Okay, now that it's kind of all starting to melt and I've got everything in there that I want, all right, because I want this to render out slowly to prevent that kind of pork piggy flavor. Okay, so I'm going to leave this, coming to check it every so often. Okay, so now this has been cooking for probably about 2.5 hours, and we're getting fewer bubbles kind of coming up, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, we're kind of keeping this on low temperature, but we're looking for when there are no more bubbles, and that's going to tell us at that point that all the water has kind of evaporated off of this. So I'm going to keep kind of watching this probably every 20 minutes or so. All right, we'll come back when it's finished. Okay, so now this has been cooking for about 2.5 hours and we really aren't getting any more bubbles forming. So I am going to strain this off now. Okay, just going to pour it through this sieve. That's going to get out the big pieces as well as kind of some of the finer stuff. And then just to make sure I'm not missing anything, I'm going to press it down gently with this spoon because I want to get all this lard out. So now that we have our strained lard in here. We also have what's called cracklins left over. You can salt these and eat them if you like. You can put them in cornbread. I don't really love them, but some people really, really do. So, you know, if you like them, go for it. They're a really nice snack. For me, I'm probably not going to do that. Yeah. What I am going to do now is I need to do something with this lard because it is going to solidify. It's kind of like a pale yellow color now, but it's going to get that nice, beautiful, pure white color as it cools down. You can put this into mason jars if you like. What I'm going to do is I have this soap mold for when I make soap. And I actually like to I line it with plastic just so it doesn't kind of drip through. But then I put parchment paper in here, and then I pour the lard in this, and that way it kind of solidifies into a nice block that I can kind of cut pieces off of. So that's how I'm going to store my lard. Okay, so I'm just going to take my cup measure here and pour it in. Okay, there is my mold filled with the leaf lard. So now I'm going to let this cool, and then we'll take it out of the mold and cut it into blocks. Okay, so now our lard has been in the fridge overnight. And if we kind of peel the paper back, you can see is this beautiful white color, and that's exactly what we're looking for. All right, so I'm going to take this out of the mold. The other thing I was going to say is you could use like plastic Tupperware containers for your mold too. Or again, you could, as I said before, you could pour hot lard into like a mason jar as well. Okay, so here are our blocks of lard that I've kind of cut to look kind of like how you would buy lard, similar to that, in the store. Okay, so now I'm going to take the lard and just wrap it in parchment paper. This one I'm going to keep in the fridge and we're going to use right away. Technically it's shelf stable, so it actually doesn't need to go in the fridge, but I just like to do that just in case. And the other two I'm going to pop into the freezer, which I vacuum sealed them, and then I'm going to pop them in the freezer and then pull them out as I need them. So here is why I actually prefer to kind of package up the lard this way. If I'm making pastry, I can put the lard in the freezer for a little bit if it's kind of just come out of the fridge, and then I can cut it up into chunks, which is a much nicer way if you're making biscuits or pastry, and that way it'll all stay cold and it gets distributed in the pastry a lot better. And then, as you can see here, I've got a beautiful chicken pot pie that I've just made with my freshly rendered lard. Super excited about this. And then I've got these extra packages that, again, I'm going to put in the freezer. So thank you for joining me on another episode of I Demand a Homestead. I strongly encourage you to try and see if you can source some leaf fat, some pork leaf fat, and then render your own leaf lard. If you like to bake and make pastry or biscuits or something like that, then this stuff is just so much better. All right, check out my video that I have on how to make pastry using leaf lard. I'll link that also up in the description. All right, if you like this video, please feel free to press the subscribe button as well as the notification bell. And I hope everybody's out there getting their baking done, and we'll see you again soon. All right, bye-bye.